Welcome back to the Discovering Your Calling podcast. I am your host, Sherry Miter, and welcome to the first waypoint or phase, if you want to call it that, of our 8-week challenge. And as a reminder, over the next 8 weeks, I'll be sharing the 8 phases, or again, waypoints, of the Discovering Your Calling Academy. It's what I'm writing about in the new book, and it's what you get to experience for free right here on the podcast. Plus, I'm going to have a bonus mindset mastery in week 9. And if you want all the details, if you missed it, go back and listen to last week's episode. Welcome to the Discovering Your Calling podcast. I'm your host, Sherry Miter. I'm here to help you unleash your strengths and get clarity on your calling. I believe when you find your purpose in life, fulfillment, joy, and success will follow. If you're ready, pop in those earbuds, hit that follow button, and join me on this journey toward discovering your calling. Here are some tips to make the most of this 8-week challenge. First, join me in the free Facebook community for more interaction, a little bit of coaching, get all your questions answered, be with other like-minded women and men, and enjoy a little extra pop-up training. And if you want to join the Facebook community, the link is in the show notes, but you can also just go to facebook.com/groups/DYC challenge and, pop in and join us there. The second tip that I have for you is that, each week, I will leave you with what I call self-work. And I say self-work because, nobody really wants homework. So we call it self-work in the Discovering Your Calling Academy. And it's work that you'll need to do yourself. And because I'll be your guide on this journey, but it's up to you to put in the work to get the results. And what I want you to think about is that you are collecting clues along the way, clues that will lead you to your calling. And inside the book, I share this analogy of a puzzle. And it's kind of like somebody just dumped, finding your calling, I should say, is like somebody just dumped this 1,000-piece puzzle upside down on your dining room table, and they took the box lid away. And now you have to flip the pieces over and try to figure out where they all go. And it might seem like an impossible feat for you right now, but as we go through these next 8 phases, you're going to see how you can start flipping these pieces over and how you can start putting your, what I call life calling puzzle together. And it'll start to make sense by the time we're completely done with all of these waypoints. But again, you've got to do the work along the way. If all you do is just listen to the podcast and you don't implement or ponder the questions I'll give you, you're going to feel just as lost as you do today. The other thing that I have for you to make the experience even better is, as I shared last week, is you are now able to download the Discovering Your Calling Academy workbook for the absolute best experience. And inside this workbook, there's space to journal, but there's also a lot of the questions, and some I may not even mention on the podcast. So this is a place for you to go back and do the self-work I just talked about. And as I mentioned last week, this is the 2022, I think, version of the workbook that you can download. Now, I am reserving a new version of it for 2025 and our students inside this, but this one's still really, really valuable. A few of the things may not make perfect sense because I'm changing some things around, but you are still going to gain a lot by downloading this workbook. So those are just your 3 tips to make this whole journey more valuable for your time. Now, that being said, this first waypoint is not just the start of this whole process, but it's what I call the compass rose of the entire Discovering Your Calling Academy. And what do I mean by that? A compass rose is that cool little symbol, navigational symbol that has a compass on it. It tells you if you're going north, west, south, or east. And I feel like your strengths are the thing, or is the thing, your CliftonStrengths 34 report, which I'll tell you what that is in a minute, don't worry. But it's that thing that if you ever feel lost on this journey of trying to discover your calling, it's to always go back to the 34 strengths, your top 10 strengths, your top 5 strengths, because they will not lead you astray. Once you go back and reread your strengths and your talents, you'll always feel like, oh, wait, that's the direction I need to go. And that's what I mean when I call it the compass rose. If you feel lost, go back to your talents and strengths report, and it will get you on the right path. This waypoint is also the hardest one to summarize in one podcast episode. Because here's the thing. In the Discovering Your Calling Academy, when we're doing this live, we take 3 full sessions to go through strengths. Inside the book, it's 3 chapters of the book. And I'm going to try to summarize it for you in like 45 minutes or less. My goal is 30, but I doubt if I'm going to hit the 30-minute mark. So what I would encourage you to do is after you listen to this episode, you're probably going to have a lot of questions about Clifton Strengths. At least I hope you do. So you could head directly to Gallup and read all you want about Clifton Strengths. Or I also do have a lot of information on my website. So you can go to sherrymiterco.com. I have an entire section on Clifton Strengths and all 34 of the talent themes. Or if you go to my services page, I have snagged one of Gallup's really cool videos and put it right on there so you can watch that video. There's also some information on YouTube that Gallup has out there about Clifton Strengths. So lots and lots of resources. And of course, I have talked a lot about Clifton Strengths on the podcast. Okay, now that we have that all out of the way, let's dive into this first waypoint. And I like to call this the navigating your strengths, or sometimes we refer to it as the start with strengths, because it is the starting place for discovering your calling. And again, it's based on Gallup's Clifton Strengths Assessment, which I do highly encourage you to take. And I am not paid from Gallup if you take the assessment. I'm just throwing that out there. I just believe in it so deeply. And I will have 3 special offers for you at the end of this episode, and a way for you to take the top 5 assessment for just $24.99, less than $25. So hang on to the end and I'll tell you all about that. But here's the thing too. I do know that right now the economy is a little crazy. And, just grocery shopping can send us into a panic attack about our checking account. So if you don't feel like you can even squeak out the $25 right now, don't worry. You are still going to find value in this. And I'm actually going to share with you in this episode 5 clues to talent that'll kind of help you figure out a few things. It's not the best thing, but it'll help you at least get through that part so that you can keep moving through the next 8 weeks. And today, like I said, I'm trying to keep this podcast semi-short for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through, give you a brief run through of what Clifton Strengths is, in case you're not familiar with that, and how it can help you discover your calling. But before we get into that, I want to share with you my personal experience with this tool and why it's become such a pivotal part of my journey and why I'm so passionate about it today. So here's my personal story, and I always laugh when I share this, but it's true. I first took the Clifton Strengths Assessment in 2016. And honestly, I don't remember who suggested I take it. I'm sure it was one of my many mentors in my direct selling company that I like to follow. And I'm all about professional assessments and personal assessments. And I love all those things. Remember like all the magazines and the Women's Day, the Women's Day or Red Book magazines. I was always taking those assessments, driving my husband crazy. So I value all those things. So of course I, paid the money, invested in the assessment, took the test, got my report. And honestly, when I read it, I thought it was really interesting. And I did wonder, how did they know so much about me? How do they know that? But I didn't know what to do with that information. So like many of us do when we don't really understand something, I tucked it away in my desk drawer and never really looked at it again for a couple of years. And what happened a few years later was that one of our corporate employees from the direct sales company I was in, he got trained in CliftonStrengths. And he was going around doing workshops for all of the sales force and the leaders. And it was when I attended one of these workshops that the light bulbs went off for me. And I finally understood what to do with this information and what it meant. And during the workshop I attended, there were 3 really big revelations that came out of this workshop for me. And I want to share those 3 with you today because I feel like when I share these 3 revelations, it kind of helps to understand why I'm so passionate about it and what it can help you do. And don't worry if you're still sitting here wondering, but what exactly is CliftonStrengths? I'm going to get to that in a minute as well. But the first revelation came when I heard about the speed reading study that Don Clifton, the founder of CliftonStrengths and the father of positive psychology, was part of. He was a researcher and professor at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln at the time. And basically what it was there was a study where they took a group of about 1,000 high school students, I think they might have been sophomores, and they conducted a test to see, what their current reading ability was. They wanted to provide them some speed reading training, and then retest them to evaluate the results. The goal was to see the best way to train students to read faster. And the participants included both average readers and already proficient readers. And the results were what was so surprising. And they surprised everybody, but when I heard about the speed reading study in the workshop I attended, I was flabbergasted. It was like, wow, this really cemented the importance of working in your strengths for me. So here's what happened. The average readers, they showed only a modest improvement. They went from 90 words a minute where they started to being able to read at 150 words per minute at the end of the study. But the proficient readers, they experienced exponential growth. Their reading speed jumped from an average of 300 words per minute at the beginning to a staggering 2,900 words per minute. Can you even imagine? So what was cool about this study is that it validated Don Clifton's theory that focusing on building strengths leads to far greater success than trying to fix weaknesses. And this concept, I feel like, runs so counter to what many of us are taught. And this was my takeaway from this study, is I thought about how many times in our life or how many times in your life have you heard, just try harder or keep practicing and you'll get better? Maybe you heard that from teachers, parents, coaches. And I wondered, have we been misled this entire time? And I also realized at that moment that I had been unintentionally misleading my own team with these very same sentiments and statements. This was so huge for me. So the second revelation came when our facilitator, the coach, started talking about the 4 domains of CliftonStrengths. And he shared that there are 34 talent themes, and each one falls into one of these 4 distinct domains. Now, when I'm doing these workshops today, I just call these domains buckets. So if you think of these 34 themes, they each fall into one of these buckets. And the 4 domains are relationship building, strategic thinking, influencing, and executing. So people with high relationship building themes, that answers the question of how do you build and nurture strong relationships? And people with dominant relationship building themes, they excel at making a team greater than the sum of its parts by fostering strong connections. As you can imagine, they are the people. Then we have strategic thinking themes, and they answer the question, how do you absorb, think about, and analyze information in situations? And those with dominant strategic thinking themes are creative and innovative, and they have the capacity to inspire new ideas that can lead to high performance. Then influencing themes, they focus on how do you influence others? And people with dominant influencing themes are the ones that take charge, speak up, and they ensure that everyone's voices are heard. And then executing themes, they're how do you make things happen? And individuals strong in executing themes know how to turn ideas into reality. And here's what the part that really surprised me. As I was learning all this, I looked at my report and I saw that I was high in influencing and strategic thinking, which was not a surprise for me because I've always loved thinking and planning and strategizing and being a cheerleader for others. But what shocked me was when I realized my first executing theme didn't show up until my number 10 theme. Now, when we're talking about Clifton Strengths, of those 34 themes, your top 10 are your most dominant themes. This is where you live and work 80 to 90% of your time. It's your greatest chance for success. So when I say that it was my number 10 theme, like it barely made the cut. And as I thought about that, it kind of made sense though. On the one hand, I thought, well, how can that be? Because obviously I had had a lot of success at that point in my life. So I knew how to get things done. But what our facilitator explained when I questioned this was that that you could use other themes to find success, or it was that I probably had inadvertently already learned how to use that theme, that it was focus, to really get things done. And knowing this also explained why I was great at creating ideas, but a lot of times I wasn't great at implementing them. And I thought about scenarios of times that I would be with my power partner and we'd be talking and walking and strategizing and brainstorming and come up with all these ideas. And she would go home and implement them. And I would go home and be like a squirrel and on to the next thing, forgetting the great ideas we just came up with. Maybe some of you can relate to that. It also explained to me why I had such a hard time trying to emulate successful mentors and how they became successful. I remember specifically one of the nationals. I took so many of her trainings and she was so organized and so highly successful and so detailed at everything she implemented. And I could just never follow that plan. And now I was starting to understand why. I started to see that my focus, that number 10 theme, that first executing theme, was indeed my secret weapon for getting things done. But I had to do it in a way that worked for me. And that meant for me to leverage my focus theme, I'd have to double down. I'd have to put on blinders. I work best with setting a timer for chunks of time, like not just a half an hour, but I needed 2-3 hours of time without distractions. And if I could set that up for myself, I could achieve a lot of things. And this method has become the key to how I achieve things. And it's the same approach I use to write my book. And it's what I do for podcasting as well. So the third revelation came when we delved into the specific meanings behind some of the Clifton Strengths themes. One in particular really stood out to me, and that was my maximizer talent theme. And this insight that I learned about my maximizer would have such a profound influence on me and my decision to change careers a year later. See, according to Gallup, people exceptionally talented in the maximizer theme focus on strengths as a way to stimulate personal and group excellence. They seek to transform something strong into something superb. And then my personalized report, which I'll explain that in a minute, resonated deeply with me, highlighting insights like you expect excellence from yourself and others. Being average at best and mediocre at worst is unacceptable to you. And it also said, you prefer to spend time with upbeat people who encourage you to use your talents, knowledge, and skills. And then I went on to read this in my report, and it said why you succeed using Maximizer. You focus on quality, and you prefer working with and for the best. By seeing what each person naturally does best and empowering them to do it, you make individuals, teams, and groups better. When I read that, I thought about my career and I thought, wow, this perfectly captured who I was and how I thrived in my work. I also began to realize that as a sales director, much of my time was spent trying to develop team members who weren't necessarily aiming for that excellence that I was seeking. They simply wanted to improve a little bit, have some cool girlfriends, and enjoy their product discount. And this newfound awareness I had clarified why I often felt frustrated with my team. And it wasn't them, it was me. It was my maximizer not having its being fulfilled, not having the needs met based on my natural talent theme. And in that moment, I knew I'd have to make a really hard decision that I'd either have to return to the field, hustling to find those few women ready to step into excellence, or, and who wanted me to coach them, or I might need to start exploring different career paths. And I knew that if I didn't make a change, I would continue to feel frustrated, exhausted, and most importantly, not fully utilize my natural gifts and talents. And here's the other thing I realized about myself. I had been doing this for 25 years. And to be honest, I was tired of the grind of searching for diamonds in the rough. And this realization became the catalyst for my journey to become a Gallup certified CliftonStrengths coach. I knew I couldn't stay where I was and feel fulfilled anymore. And I knew pursuing a career where I could work with individuals eager to hone their strengths would give me more purpose. And I knew I was looking for individuals who did believe they were destined for extraordinary lives and that mediocrity was simply unacceptable. Perhaps women and men like you. And beyond that, I felt a genuine sadness at the thought of wasting my God-given talents. I want to be a good steward of the gifts God has given me. And I do look at strengths as our talent DNA that He put inside of us when He created us. And I don't know about you, but when that day comes, and hopefully it's not for many, many years for any of us, and I stand at the pearly gates, I want to hear, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." And the only way I'm going to hear that is if I utilize all the gifts and talents I have. And, as I shared inside the Discovering Your Calling book and Academy, we dive really deep into Clifton Strengths. So that if you're feeling like, well, that's really interesting, but I still don't really understand any of this, that's where we go deeper. But again, you can go to Gallup, you can go to my website and really start to see what I'm talking about here. But I am going to try to simplify things just a little bit more for you as we go through the rest of this episode. But here's what I want you to understand right now is that as you embark on this journey of, discovering your calling, I don't just want you to uncover the gifts and talents God placed within you. I want you to learn how to harness them to gain clarity on your true calling and what will lead you to a fulfilling, purpose-driven life. And that's the role Clifton Strengths plays in discovering your calling. Because after my own experience and my own journey with Clifton Strengths, it's really hit me that knowing your natural talents is the game changer. It is the first and most important step in figuring out your calling. And without it, you're going to feel lost so many times. Remember, it's your compass rose. And it's one of the crucial pieces for your calling puzzle, the foundation for everything that follows in the discovering your calling process.
Another game changer for me has been Magic Mind, which is a mental performance shot. And as an author, staying focused while writing my book is crucial. And Magic Mind has become my secret weapon in the mornings. I just take a shot with my coffee to boost my mental clarity and productivity, especially during those tough editing sessions. Anyway, it's packed with nootropics like lion's mane mushrooms, adaptogens like ashwagandha, and vitamins like B12 and D3 with no sugar. So it's everything I need for a clear, energized mind without the crash. And honestly, since turning 58, I appreciate all the help I can get. So I'm proud to partner with Magic Mind and offer you a 20% discount or up to 48% off if you choose to do the subscription. And if you want to give it a try for yourself, just use my code DYC20 at magicmind.com/DYC and see how it helps you stay focused and productive too. And it just might boost up your talent themes.
So you don't necessarily have to run out and take the assessment to understand everything I'm talking about right now. And the rest, I want to give some little foundation here to kind of get your head thinking about what it means for you and how you can kind of understand what strengths and talents are without taking the assessment right now. So if you take a moment right now and think about one of the best jobs you've ever had. You know, maybe you were a lifeguard at 17, pushing yourself to be the best. Or your first gig after college was where you got to travel with an awesome team. Or perhaps you worked at a local YWCA one summer, and even though the pay wasn't great, you loved serving others. Whatever that was, at the end of the day, you likely felt fulfilled. After all, this was one of the best jobs you've ever had. And you might have been tired, but something about that job made you feel valued, energized, and like you were making a difference. Now, let's flip that and think about one of the worst jobs you've ever had. Maybe it's the one you're in now, and that's why you're doing this 8-week challenge. And that worst job probably made you feel drained, frustrated, and maybe out of place, like you were always struggling to keep up while others seem to thrive. And perhaps feeling like you just don't belong in that place. You felt like the round peg in the square hole. Now, what's the big difference? Yes, it could have been the boss or the coworkers or the manager, but a big part of it probably had to do with whether you were working in your strengths or not. And you may not have even been aware of that. You see, in your best job, chances are you were able to use your natural talents. And in your worst job, those talents probably were either underutilized or completely ignored. And this is why knowing and understanding your strengths is crucial to discovering your true calling. It's not just about what you can do, it's about what you were designed to do. What energizes you, what brings out your best, and where you truly shine. And when you can align your work and life with these strengths, you set yourself up for greater success, fulfillment, and joy. So let's take a second here and really start to understand what exactly is CliftonStrengths. So the CliftonStrengths Assessment was originally known as StrengthsFinders, is a research-based talent assessment, which identifies what you were naturally best at. It was developed by Donald O. Clifton from that speed reading test, and who is often called, as I shared before, the father of strengths-based psychology. And this assessment shifts the focus from fixing weaknesses to amplifying what you do best. The assessment includes 177 questions, at least. I have heard there's a few more added to it now. And each question offers a pair of statements. And neither's right or wrong. It's just how you naturally think or feel about that statement. And your task is to select the statement that most resonates with you. Then, based on your responses, the assessment can help you identify and pinpoint your natural patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving, which are then categorized into these 34 CliftonStrengths themes. Themes like focus and maximizer that I already mentioned about myself. And then when these strengths are applied productively, they significantly enhance your performance in specific tasks. And in my view, what really sets CliftonStrengths apart from other assessments is its deeply personalized nature. The results are so individualized that the probability of another person having the same top 5 strengths in the exact same order as you is 1 in 33 million. The other thing that's very personalized is, remember the report that I read to you, little segments about my maximizer? That's customized to me. You might have maximizer in your top 10, but part of that's going to read very differently than mine. Because what Gallup does is they take not just what that assessment is, but they look at where the other 34 themes lie on your reports and your assessment. And they take that into account. It's so fascinating to me. And again, I strongly encourage people to take the time and invest a little bit of money to take the assessment. You will be amazed. But through my work with clients and my training from Gallup, I have observed that people often overlook some of their innate talents. And this is another reason why I'm passionate about having people actually take the assessment. Now, again, in a minute, I'm going to give you 5 clues to talent. But here's the thing. So many times we don't recognize our own talents. And the 3 of the most common reasons for that are, number 1, misconceptions about strengths. Many people have been told that their strengths are weaknesses. Number 2 reason why we don't recognize our talents is that raw talents and potential blind spots. This is when some strengths may be raw, unrefined, or simply misused, getting in our way. And the 3rd reason we may not recognize them as talents is some of our talents are so intrinsic and effortless that they are taken for granted or just go unnoticed. You don't realize they're a talent that's unique to you. You may just be wondering, well, doesn't everybody do it that way? Or why don't they do it this way? Don't they see? So you don't recognize your natural talent. Now, again, at the end of this podcast, I'm going to tell you how you can take the assessment for less than $25. But in the meanwhile, let's talk about the 5 clues to talent. So in their book, Soar with Strengths, Donald Clifton and Paula Nelson encourage readers to scan your life for anything you have ever done well. And this includes strengths from your childhood, college, or the present day. And then reflect and consider these 5 characteristics. They are clues to what your talents are. Number 1 is yearnings. So what activities are you naturally drawn to? What energizes you? Reflect on moments when you've thought, wow, I'd love to try that. These yearnings can be a strong indicator of your innate talents. The second clue is rapid learning. What activities do you pick up quickly? Think about that best job you had. What task did you grasp easily while others may have struggled? Rapid learning in certain areas can highlight where your strengths lie. The third clue is flow. This is in which activities do you find yourself so engrossed that you lose track of time? What projects captivate you to the point of forgetting even to eat? That's a huge one for me. And this state of flow is a major sign of operating within your strengths. So what are you doing when you just lose track of time? You forget to stop and eat. You don't even back up your cup of coffee. And then the fourth clue is glimpses of excellence. And this has to reflect on moments of subconscious excellence where you thought, how did I even do that? And what do others frequently ask for your advice on? These moments often point to your natural talents. And then the fifth clue is satisfaction. What activities leave you feeling fulfilled, either during or after completion, prompting you to think, when can I do that again? This sense of satisfaction is a clear indicator of your strengths at play. Now, I'm going to put these 5 clues to talent. I'll print them out or copy them and post them in the Facebook community so you can actually see them in print. Another reason to join us over in the Facebook community for this challenge. So by now, I hope you're starting to kind of understand why Clifton Strengths is so important in helping you discover your calling. I hope you're really curious about it and intrigued to take the assessment. And if not, at least you kind of spend time thinking about these 5 clues. But I have one more story for you on why it's a powerful tool for helping you determine not just what you should be doing to be successful, but what environment do you need in order to thrive? And that's a key factor as we're discovering your calling. In the next waypoint or phase, the next podcast episode, I'm going to be talking about visioneering. And in that, we talk about how in modern world, we have our career and then we're supposed to fit our life in all these other pieces. And I flip that around and say, let's create the ideal life we want and then put fit your career around that ideal life that you want to create. And this is part of it. Like knowing what environment that you will thrive in is so important because we want to be clear on where we're headed and how we can get there. And we don't want to end up creating, an environment for ourselves where we won't thrive. Now, a few years ago, I was a featured guest at a network marketing group retreat. And we had a small workshop for the leaders and then a large group event for the entire sales force. And it was in the smaller workshop for the leaders where one of the participants had a huge aha. Now, what we were doing during this segment of the workshop is we were using one of my favorite worksheets, and it's one that we use inside the Discovering Your Calling Academy. And it highlights 2 important identifiers for people that's based on each of your talent strengths. And it's the bring need sheet, and it's what you bring. So what each person contributes to the team or the world, sometimes I like to say, or basically the value you add. And then also what you need, based on what you need in order to show up as your best self and what gives you energy. And I like to think of that as more of your environment that you need in order to thrive. And one of the directors, and we'll just call her Terry, has input and context in her top 10 talent themes. And Gallup describes people who are exceptionally talented in the input theme as having a need to collect and archive. They crave to know more and can provide additional perspectives and tools that others can benefit from. Now, those with high context theme enjoy thinking about the past and understand the present by researching its history. They like to gather relevant information to help them make decisions. They are at their best when they are enhancing quality by ensuring people don't repeat mistakes. Now, as Terry read through the descriptive words on what she needs to thrive, she had a huge aha moment. She realized why she sometimes clashed with her peers when they were brainstorming new ideas and planning events. You see, one of her peers, who she worked very closely with, and they had a great relationship. They just had this one area where they clashed. Her peer, Terry's peer, has high activator. In fact, it's her number 2 talent theme. Now, according to Gallup, people exceptionally talented in the activator theme can make things happen by turning thoughts into action. They want to do things now rather than simply talk about them. They are at their best when they are taking advantage of opportunities others miss, and they aren't afraid to take risks. And Terry shared with the group that there were many times when their team would be brainstorming about a project, and she'd want to take the time to do the research and process the information before taking action. Remember, she's high context, high input. They need time to gather information and process. Whereas her peer with the high activator didn't want to waste any time and thought they should jump into action right now. And after we took this deeper dive into what their talent themes meant, Terry now understood why they were having this conflict, because it was confirmed to her that she wasn't being fearful or delaying things on purpose. She just needed time to process. And when she had that time, her thoughtful input would often benefit the entire group. So after much discussion during this workshop on this, we actually came up with a few suggestions that kept both individuals, the high activator and the one with high context and input, Terry, they both left this workshop feeling really great about working together on future projects. And, this story just illustrates a few key things. One, on how strengths enhance relationships. Now, that's not the topic of our Discovering Your Calling. It's just a side benefit of knowing your talent themes, especially if you know your coworkers or your partner's talent themes. Really great for healthy relationships. But it also illustrates that when we know what we bring to the table, we can be really clear on where and how we want to work in the future. And it also illustrates the need to have the right environment to thrive. Because if Terry was placed, now she was an independent consultant, a leader in direct sales, so she could create her own environment. But what if she couldn't? What if she was put into a group? And actually, I coached a client in a similar situation where she was a manager in a bank branch, and her higher boss was an activator who wanted things now. And she did have themes like deliberative, who wanted time to think about things like Terry. So she struggled in that environment. So it's really important to understand what environment will you thrive in, and how can we make sure as you discover your calling, you put yourself in that type of environment. Okay, my friends, this has been a lot of information, a lot of information. And again, I can't emphasize enough, this is the reason I encourage you to hop over to the Facebook community, because you could pop in there and ask me all the questions you have about this podcast episode. Again, head to my website, sherrymiterco.com. Remember, 1 R, 1 I in Sherry. And read about Clifton Strengths, watch the videos, head to Gallup, learn more about Clifton Strengths. But the self-work I have for you for this week is to determine what environment you need to thrive. And whether or not you take the assessment, you can do this simply by thinking back to the best jobs you've ever had. We already did that, right? So you're already halfway there. But then think, what are the common threads in the best jobs? So not just one job, but the best jobs. What was the common thread as far as the environment goes? Or maybe the mental space that you were given to work? Was it because, like Jerry needed, you had time to pause, reflect, and think before making any decisions? Or maybe it was because you were on a team that allowed you the freedom to be the idea person, and then someone else would implement the ideas. That's an environment I would thrive in. Or maybe you have high activator and you would thrive in a fast-paced, action-taking environment. And that was where you had your best jobs. So none of it's right or wrong. It's just what makes you unique. Now, as we move forward on this journey, the goal is to think of ways you can create that best situation again. Now, if you have taken the Clifton Strengths Assessment, you can also turn to pages, I think it's 11 through 15 of your Discovering Your Calling workbook. Don't forget to download that. The link is in the show notes to get the workbook. And I'll also have the link in the Facebook community as well. But you could take the time to reflect and answer the questions for each of your talent themes that are listed in the workbook. And if you haven't taken the Clifton Strengths Assessment and you would like to, I have 3 packages for strengths starting at, again, $24.99, where you get at least your top 5. Or you can do a little more for your full 34. Or again, I do have the VIP upgrade where you will get a free assessment and a coaching call to go over your assessment with me, along with another coaching session to do later in the 8-week challenge. But you can go for the top 5 Clifton Strengths Assessment, you can just go to my website at sherrymiterco.com/services. I'm also going to post these in the Facebook community. And if you're ready to upgrade to the VIP and get the free assessment, you can head to bit.ly/ICVIP. So it's bit.ly/DYCVIP. And that will get you all the information on the VIP upgrade. And again, I'm going to post all of this in the Facebook community. That's why that is really the best place to go. I'll have all the links, information, and you can ask me questions about anything else over there. And the Facebook community, again, was facebook.com/groups/DYC challenge. To join the Facebook community. All right, my friends, you can also find me on Facebook and just send me an email at sherry@sherrymiterco.com. All of that is in the show notes. And we will see you next week for one of my favorite waypoints on visioneering. And yeah, don't miss that one. It's super fun. It's not going to be quite as heavy as this one, I promise. It's going to be light. It's going to be fun. Grab a journal to come with me on that journey next week.
Thank you for spending this time with me. My hope is something you heard today inspires you to take action toward discovering your calling. I just have 2 favors to ask of you before you go. 1, if you found value and enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and you might hear your review read on a future episode. And 2, can you share this episode with 3 friends who will also enjoy it as much as you did? By doing these things, you will help us grow the podcast to make a bigger impact on the world. And until next week, remember, you've been created to live a life of fulfillment, freedom, purpose, success, and joy.